or capital before the full word emerges. This suggests that every time we hear a word, there's a brief explosion of meanings in our minds, and by the recognition process moves more rapidly with a sentence that gives us context than in a random string of words. Context also helps guide us towards the intended cases of homophones, like no or no. For multilingual people, the language they are listening to is another cue, used to eliminate potential words that don't match the language context. So what about adding completely new words to this system? Even as adults, we may come across a new word every few days, but if every word is represented as a fine-tuned pattern of activity distributed over many neurons, how do we prevent new words from overwriting old ones? We think that to avoid this problem, new words are initially stored in a part of the brain called the hippocampus, well away from the main store of words, so they don't share neurons with other words. Then, over multiple nights of sleep, the new words gradually transfer over and interweave with old ones. Researchers think this gradual acquisition process helps avoid disrupting existing words. So in the daytime, it generates explosions of meaning as we chat away. At night, we rest, but our brains are busy integrating new knowledge into the word network. When we wake up, this process ensures that we're ready for the ever-changing world of language. At TED, we're passionate about the human capacity to share ideas. That's why the TED team created a program to help you mine your life experience for ideas and stories worth sharing, and then craft those experiences into compelling talks. It's called TED Masterclass, and you can learn more and download the app at TED.com/masterclass.
Oh!
It's 4 a.m. and the big test is in 8 hours, followed by a piano cycle. You've been studying and writing for days, but you still don't feel ready for either. So what can you do? Well, you can drink another cup of coffee and spend the next few hours cramming and practicing. But believe it or not, you might be better off closing the books, putting away the music, and going to sleep. Sleep occupies nearly a third of our lives, but many of us give surprisingly little attention to it. This neglect is often the result of a major misunderstanding. Sleep isn't lost time, or just a way to rest when all
Full damage.
work is done. Instead, it's a critical function during which your body balances and regulates its vital systems, affecting respiration and regulating everything from circulation to growth and immune response. That's great, but you can worry about all those things after this test, right? Well, not so fast. It turns out that sleep is also crucial for your brain, with a fifth of your body's circulatory blood channeled to it as you drift off. And what goes on in your brain while you sleep is an intensely active period of restructuring that's crucial for how our memory works. At first glance, our ability to remember things doesn't seem very impressive at all. 19th century psychologist Herman Ebbinghaus demonstrated that we normally forget 40% of new material within the first 12 minutes, a phenomenon known as the forgetting curve. But this loss can be prevented through memory consolidation, the process by which information is moved from our fleeting short-term memory to our more durable long-term memory. This consolidation occurs with the help of a major part of the brain known as the hippocampus. Its role in long-term memory formation was demonstrated in the 1950s by Brenda Milner in her research with a patient known as HM. After having his hippocampus removed, HM's ability to form new short-term memories was damaged, but he was able to learn physical tasks through repetition. Due to the removal of his hippocampus, HM's ability to form long-term memories was also damaged. What this case revealed, among other things, was that the hippocampus was specifically involved in the consolidation of long-term declarative memory, such as the facts and concepts you need to remember for test rather than procedural memory, such as the finger movements you need to master for that recital. Milner's findings, along with work by Eric Kandel in the 90s, have given us our current model of how this consolidation process works. Sensory data is initially transcribed and temporarily recorded in the neurons as short-term memory. From there, it travels to the hippocampus, which strengthens and enhances the neurons in that cortical area. Thanks to the phenomenon of neuroplasticity, new synaptic buds are formed, allowing new connections between neurons and strengthening the neural network where the information will be returned as long-term memory. So why do we remember some things and not others? Well, there are a few ways to influence the extent and effectiveness of memory retention. For example, memories that are formed in times of heightened feeling or even stress will be better recorded due to their hippocampus's link with emotion. But one of the major factors contributing to memory consolidation is, you guessed it, a good night's sleep. Sleep is composed of 4 stages, the deepest of which are known as slow-wave sleep and rapid eye movement. EEG machines monitoring people during these stages have shown electrical impulses moving between the brainstem, hippocampus, thalamus, and cortex, which serve as relay stations of memory formation. And the different stages of sleep have been shown to help consolidate different types of memories. During the non-REM slow-wave sleep, declarative memory is encoded into a temporary store in the anterior part of the hippocampus. Through a dialogue between the cortex and hippocampus, it is then repeatedly reactivated, driving its gradual redistribution to long-term storage in the cortex. REM sleep, on the other hand, with its similarity to waking brain activity, is associated with the consolidation of procedural memory. So based on the studies, going to sleep 3 hours after memorizing your formulas and 1 hour after practicing your scales would be the most ideal. So hopefully you can see now that skipping on sleep not only harms your long-term health, but actually makes it less likely that you retain all that knowledge and practice from the previous night. All of which just goes to affirm the wisdom of the phrase sleep on it. When you think about all the internal restructuring and forming of new connections that occurs while you slumber, you can even say proper sleep will have you waking up every morning with a new improved brain, ready to face the challenges ahead.
Taking the trap.
Thank you very much. Well, I would like to start with testicles. Men who sleep 5 hours a
He'll
night
die
have
anyway.
significantly smaller testicles than those who sleep 7 hours or more. In addition, men who routinely sleep just 4 to 5 hours a night will have a level of testosterone which is that of someone 10 years their senior. So a lack of sleep will age a man by a decade in terms of that critical aspect of wellness. And we see equivalent impairments in female reproductive health caused by a lack of
soup drinks.
This is the best news that I have for you today. From this point, it may only get worse. Not only will I tell you about the wonderfully good things that happen when you get sleep, but the alarmingly bad things that happen when you don't get enough, both for your brain and for your body. Let me start with the brain and the functions of learning and memory. Because what we've discovered over the past 10 or so years is that you need sleep after learning to essentially hit the save button on those new memories so that you don't forget.
It's your superpower.
But recently we discovered that you also need sleep before learning. And now to actually prepare your brain, almost like a dry sponge, ready to initially soak up new information. And without sleep,
Alright, let's go.
Circuits of the brain essentially become waterlogged, as it were, and you can't absorb new memories. So let me show you the data. Here in this study, we decided to test the hypothesis that pulling the all-nighter was a good idea. So we took a group of individuals, and we assigned them to one of two experimental groups, a sleep group and a sleep deprivation group. Now the sleep group, they're going to get a full 8 hours of sleep, but the deprivation group, we're going to keep them awake in the laboratory under full supervision. There's no naps or caffeine, by the way, so it's miserable for everyone involved. And then the next day, we're going to place those participants inside an MRI scanner. I'm going to have them try and learn a whole list of new facts as we're taking snapshots of brain activity. And then we're going to test them to see how effective that learning has been. And that's what you're looking at here on the vertical axis. And when you put those two groups head to head, what you find is a quite significant 40% deficit in the ability of the brain to make new memories without sleep. I think this should be concerning considering what we know is happening to sleep in our education populations right now. In fact, to put that in context, it would be the difference in a child acing an exam versus failing it miserably, 40%. And we've gone on to discover what goes wrong within your brain to produce these types of learning disabilities. And there's a structure that sits on the left and the right side of your brain called the hippocampus. And you can think of the hippocampus almost like the informational inbox of your brain. It's very good at receiving new memory files and then holding on to them. And when you look at this structure in those people who had a full night of sleep, we saw lots of healthy learning-related activity. Yet in those people who were sleep deprived, we actually couldn't find any significant signal whatsoever. So it's almost as though sleep deprivation had shut down your memory inbox, and any new incoming files, they were just being bounced. You couldn't effectively commit new experiences to memory. So that's the bad that can happen if I were to take sleep away from you. But let me just come back to that control group for a second. Remember those folks that got a full 8 hours of sleep? Well, we can ask a very different question. What is it about the physiological quality of your sleep when you do get it that restores and enhances your memory and learning ability each and every day? And by placing electrodes all over the head, what we've discovered is that there are big, powerful brainwaves that happen during the very deepest stages of sleep and have riding on top of them these spectacular bursts of electrical activity that we call sleep spindles. And it's the combined quality of these deep sleep brainwaves that acts like a file transfer mechanism at night, shifting memories from a short-term vulnerable reservoir to a more permanent long-term storage site within the brain, and therefore protecting them, making them safe. And it is important that we understand what during sleep actually transacts these memory benefits, because there are real medical and societal implications. And let me just tell you about one area that we've moved this work out into clinically, which is the context of aging and dementia. Because it's, of course, no secret that as we get older, our learning and memory abilities begin to fade and decline. But what we've also discovered is that a physiological signature of aging is that your sleep gets worse, especially that deep quality of sleep that I was just discussing. And only last year we found evidence that these two things, they're not simply co-occurring, they are significantly interrelated. And it suggests that the disruption of deep sleep is an underappreciated factor that is contributing to cognitive decline or memory decline in aging, and most recently we've discovered in Alzheimer's disease as well. Now, I know this is remarkably depressing news. It's in the mail, it's coming at you. But there's a potential silver lining here. Unlike many of the other factors that we know are associated with aging, for example, changes in the physical structure of the brain are fiendishly difficult to treat. But that sleep is a missing piece in the explanatory puzzle of aging and Alzheimer's is exciting because we may be able to do something about it. And one way that we are approaching this at my sleep center is not by using sleeping pills, by the way. Unfortunately, they are blunt instruments that do not produce naturalistic sleep. Instead, we're actually developing a method based on this. It's called direct current brain stimulation. You insert a small amount of voltage into the brain, so small you typically don't feel it, but it has a...
Whoa, wala na. Naglalag. Sleep pa more.
As if you're sort of sinking time with those deep sleep brainwaves. Not only can you amplify the size of those deep sleep brainwaves, but in
Lag, boys. Sorry. This is not helping.